Welcome to Narayana IAS Academy. This is Surekha Bhaskar presenting to you the daily news analysis. So for today's discussion, we've picked up a number of articles from both the Hindu as well as the Indian Express, which are both important and relevant for the UPSC CSE examination. Now let us have a look at the topics one by one. The first article for the day has been picked up from page number 10 of the Indian Express. Low and high skilled jobs gaps rise as the manufacturing stagnation continues. So in this particular article, we will be discussing about India's economic shift towards the services, particularly the sector of IT, while declining in manufacturing as well as the other labor intensive sectors. Also, the article discusses about various concerns and challenges with respect to that of skill gap, with respect to job creation as well as India's role in the global value chains. The second article has been picked up from page number 7 of the Hindu, Realizing the Rural-Urban Continuum. So in this particular article, as the title suggests, we'll be dealing with the concept of rural-urban continuum. And before that, it is important for us to understand what are the challenges that India faces with respect to that of its urbanization, and what does the article criticize about the separation of the rural as well as the urban governance laws. And also, it actually suggests a comprehensive as well as an integrated strategy with respect to both infrastructure as well as governance, considering the urban-rural continuum in development planning. Moving on, the third article has been picked up from page number 16 of the Indian Express, Why Global Commons Matter and How the Community is Important in Their Well-Being. So in this particular article, we will be discussing about this particular concept of commons and also the other relevant and related concepts like the global commons, the tragedy of commons, etc. and also why is it important to have a community-led governance framework. The fourth article has been picked up from page number 16 of the Indian Express, Behind Typhoon Yagi Becoming the Most Powerful Storm in Asia this year. So as the title suggests, we'll be discussing about this particular tropical monsoon, that is the Typhoon Yagi, that becoming the most powerful in Asia this year. How is it actually formed as well as how it is actually relevant with respect to that of climate change. The last article that we've picked up for discussion today has been picked up from page number 1 of the Hindu, Nipah deaths in Malappuram. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about the resurgence of Nipah virus in the state of Kerala, specifically in Malappuram. And when it comes to these kind of virus as well as the diseases, the spread, etc., it is important for us to understand and to know about the transmission, the symptoms, as well as the problems that India faces with respect to that of lack of vaccines. And towards the end of the session, we will actually be discussing few MCQs as well as the mains practice question. And now let us get into the discussion. The first article for the day that we'll be discussing about is Low and High Skilled Jobs Gaps Rising as Manufacturing Stagnation Continues. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about various concepts, and particularly we will actually start with discussing about how India's economy has actually shifted towards the services sector, particularly IT, while you see manufacturing as well as the labor intensive sectors have been declining. And also we'll be discussing about various concerns and challenges in India with respect to job creation, be it the skill gap as well as India's participation in the global value chain. Okay. So here we'll be discussing about employment and unemployment as it's a part of your syllabus directly, as well as sectors of the economy like the primary, secondary as well as the tertiary sector, where primary actually being agriculture and the tertiary being services. Okay. And here this particular topic is actually relevant for both your prelims, and however it is more relevant for the mains examination under GS paper 3, economic growth and development, employment and unemployment. Okay. So moving forward, there has been a previous year question which has been asked in the year 2015 with respect to the nature of economic growth in India. So any topic that we actually start with, it is very important that we map it to the type of question that has been asked in the previous years in the examination. Now moving forward, let us actually understand what this particular article is discussing about. Okay. So India's economic trajectory over past 2 decades, that is, over the past 20 years, if you see how India's economy has actually been performing, it has showcased rapid growth in the services sector. Right, there are actually primary sector, secondary sector as well as tertiary sector. That is, one is primary sector, it actually involves agriculture. The next actually involves manufacturing, and the tertiary actually involves services. Okay. So if you see over the past 20 years, how has the economy of India actually been transitioning is that it is found out that rapid growth is actually been observed in the services sector, particularly in IT, that is information and technology, while manufacturing sector has struggled to keep up the pace, leading to significant challenges in the creation of jobs across various skill levels. Okay. Now, let us exactly understand what is actually the scenario and what is the problem that has actually led to it. Okay. So, here it is job creation in various sectors of the Indian economy. So, now let us actually look at the scenario first. So, here the India's economic growth has actually increasingly shifted towards the services sector that we saw, particularly inclined towards information and technology, particularly inclined towards, finance, banking, etc. over the past 20 years. Next, if you see, the services sector alone accounts for over 50% of India's GDP, with a notable contribution from the IT exports and employing a large number of skilled professionals who are actually paid extremely huge amounts of money. And also, India's services exports make up to around 4.3% of the global commercial services exports, and this rise in IT-related jobs has led to the creation of high-paying opportunities, particularly in the field of data analytics as well as software development. Okay, so here you just need to understand that it actually talks about the trends of how the job creation in the Indian economy has transitioned over years, that is particularly for the past 20 years. Okay, it actually says that India's economy has actually slowly been moving from manufacturing now towards the services sectors, particularly with respect to that of IT. And here it actually contributes, that is services actually contributes to over 50% of India's GDP. And also the exports actually make up to 4.3, that is the services we actually provide to the other countries is actually 4.3% of the global commercial exports. And also this is actually eventually led to high-paying opportunities, particularly in streams of data analytics as well as software development. Now, let us see what is actually the problem. Okay, so however, the expansion of services has coincided. So, see, there is not simultaneous growth of both the manufacturing as well as the services sector. Okay, here the expansion of services is actually very, very significant, and this is actually coincided with the stagnation of the manufacturing sector, which is very, very concerning. While the services sector creates high-skilled jobs, you know that it actually specifically it involves or employs people in data analytics, data science, etc. While manufacturing, which has the potential to generate low-skilled employment, has remained stagnant at around 14% of the GDP, which is far, far below than the target of 25%, which was set under the Make in India initiative. Now, if you see, what is the amount of job that India actually has to create, given that the demographic dividend as well as the growing population is that India needs to generate around 7.85 million jobs annually in the non-farm sector. Okay, which is non-agriculture sector, in order to absorb the growing workforce, according to the data or the observation of the Economic Survey 2023-2024. Again, this is very, very important. Despite this need, the national unemployment rate, so despite India actually having to create 7.5 million jobs with respect to, as per the observation that has been made by the Economic Survey, we still see that the national unemployment rate actually surged from 7% to 9% as of June 2024, highlighting the challenges actually India faces with respect to that of unemployment, specifically in the labor-intensive sectors. Okay. Now, let us actually see what and why has there been a decline in the labor-intensive jobs. A key concern is the decline in low-skill labor-intensive jobs, particularly we saw in the manufacturing sector such as the textiles, apparels as well as footwear. If you see, this manufacturing sector has been historically providing employment to millions of low-skilled workforce, yet India has lost its competitive edge to other countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam and Thailand in these industries. And as per the World Bank's report, it actually noted a decline in export-related jobs, with employment linked to exports peaking at 9.5% of the total domestic employment in 2012, but it has fallen to 6.5% by 2020. See, all these data and trends are actually important. However, it is not very important to memorize all these data facts, okay? It is just important to know whether manufacturing has been performing better recently or the services has taken over the manufacturing sector. How much does the primary sector of agriculture contribute to India's GDP, etc. You need to know. Now, India has been, incapable, or it is unable to capitalize on China's exit from the low-skill manufacturing. China has actually, moved out of the low-skill manufacturing, but still India is not able to make money or capitalize on China's exit, okay, between 2015 and 22, and this has further aggravated the issue, okay. Next, if you see, despite, there are a lot of opportunities in apparel as well as the leather industries, India has significantly fallen beyond or behind its competitors. This actually had missed a crucial balance in order to boost the labor-intensive job creation. So, if you actually look at this particular infographic, on the x-axis you see the years, that is 2000, 2005, 10, 15 and 20. Here you see the percentage of domestic employment, okay. So, this is 5%. Here you can see the direct employment and here you can see the indirect employment. So, here the World Bank indicates that while high-skilled jobs generated through manufacturing exports are rising, trade-related low-skill job opportunities are rapidly moving from India towards Vietnam as well as Bangladesh, okay. So, this is what it is actually saying. Now, let us actually look at the concept of global capability centers. So, what are they and how significant it is for India? So, while low-skill manufacturing has declined, that is, the job opportunities that the apparel as well as the textiles, whatever they are creating, that has declined, India has emerged a global hub for multinational companies that actually establishes the global capability centers. So, what are global capability centers? These actually focus on, dimensions like data analytics, software development as well as other IT services, thereby leveraging India's large pool of qualified IT professionals. Also, if you see, India hosts around 1,600 global capability centers from multinational companies with sectors ranging from finance and consumer electronics to modern trade and shipping, establishing their core operations in India. So, this is what they say, that how it is significant for establishing the global capability centers in India. And these centers also manage critical functions such as design, inventory, management and supply chain logistics, creating jobs for engineers as well as IT professionals, okay. However, despite the rise of these centers and the IT sector, the industry has actually seen a slump in hiring. That is, there has been a decline in hiring in 2024, with major companies like Infosys, Wipro and Tech Mahindra collectively reducing their workforce by over 61,000, which is very concerning compared to that of the previous year. And this actually highlights the challenges of maintaining job growth even in the high-skill sectors. Now, moving forward, let us see, one more problem that India actually faces is its declined participation in the global value chains, okay. So, one of the significant reasons behind the job creation challenges in India's manufacturing sector is the country's declining participation in the global value chain. So, for this, it is very important for us to understand what do you mean by global value chain, okay. So, this is nothing but it is a production process. It is a production process that involves multiple countries and companies which are responsible for a large portion of, number one, it can be global trade, it is employment as well as GDP, okay. So, it has various type of, activities that is actually involved over here. That is, it can include the design, it can include production, marketing, distribution, then support for the final consumer, etc. So, this is called as a global value chain, where a number or multiple countries as well as companies actually come together, contributing significantly to the global trade, employment as well as the GDP. So, there they are saying that India's participation has been significantly less, and approximately, if you see, 70% of the international trade involves GVCs, but India's participation has been shrinking, and India's trade in goods and services as a percentage of GDP has also declined over the past 5 years, weakening its export potential. And also, if you see the World Bank data, it indicates that Indian exporters linked to GVCs demonstrate stronger performance with greater product as well as market diversification when compared to the non-GVC linked firms. Okay. Now moving on, India's average tariff rates. So the average tariff rates of India has actually increased to 18.1% in 2022 from the 13% that it actually had in 2014, making it very less competitive globally. In contrast, if you see the Southeast Asian countries like Myanmar, Vietnam, Thailand and Mexico have maintained lower tariffs, enhancing their participation in the global value chains. And also there are different factors like difficulties in procuring raw materials and higher costs of transportation have further limited India's ability in order to integrate to the GVCs, reducing the trade-related creation of jobs. So overall, what is actually the takeaway from this article is that first we actually looked at what has been India's performance, that is with respect to the primary, the secondary as well as the tertiary sector, and we've actually seen that over the past 2 decades how has India's economy shifted or transitioned towards the services sector, particularly the IT. And we see that IT has actually opened up new dimensions or avenues like data analytics, etc. for high skilled laborers, whereas it has been complemented or it is actually simultaneously accompanied by the stagnation of job creation in the manufacturing sector. So we saw what is actually the current scenario, we actually discussed about the problem, and also we looked at what are the problems with respect to lesser or the hesitant participation of India in the global value chains. We discussed about what is the concept of GVCs, and now we need to arrive at a neutral conclusion or a way forward where we need to enumerate the strategies that India actually has to adopt to perform better. So India's job creation scenario presents a dichotomy. That is, while its services sector, particularly IT, has actually driven high-skill job growth, whereas the manufacturing sector stagnation has led to decline in the low-skill labor-intensive jobs. In order to meet the growing workforce's demands, India must address its participation in the global value chains and also bolster its manufacturing capabilities while continuing to expand its services sector. And also, it is important that a balanced approach across all the sectors is actually critical in order to ensure inclusive job growth as well as a long-term stable economy or economic stability. The next article that we'll be discussing about is realizing the rural-urban continuum. Okay, so this particular topic is very important as we have urbanization in our syllabus, as well as we'll be understanding this particular concept of urban-rural continuum and why is it important for us to have an integrated approach in terms of both governance as well as infrastructure. Okay. So here we'll be discussing about urbanization, where we can actually map it to GS paper 1 under the mains examination, their problems as well as the remedies. Now moving forward, there has been a previous year question which was asked in the year 2013 with respect to the various social problems which originated out of the speedy process of urbanization in India. So this particular topic becomes very, very important as it has already been asked in the exam once. Now let us understand what this particular article is discussing about. Okay, so the article basically discusses the need to address India's urban and rural challenges as a part of continuum rather than distinct categories. It actually says that rather than focusing on both the rural and the urban areas in silos, the government actually has to bring an integrated approach because the population has actually been increasing, or there has been demographic shifts in the tier 2 as well as tier 3 cities which are called as the urban rural regions, that is continuum regions. Okay. Now moving forward, let us understand what is the urban-rural continuum. So this refers to an interconnected and overlapping nature of urban and rural areas rather than treating them as separate and distinct categories. And this particular concept emphasizes that the challenges and the issues faced by these areas are not isolated but they are part of a continuous spectrum. That is what they are saying. Any kind of challenges that actually occur in these areas should not be treated in silos such as the urban as well as rural separately. Rather than we need to understand that it is a continuum. Now moving forward, let us understand how has been India's urbanization and what is the status of India's urban-rural continuum. Okay, so currently if you see, India's population actually stood at 1,210 million in 2011 with an urbanization level of 31.1% according to the Census of India 2011. And also, if you see, India's urban population is expected to grow from 410 million, which was in 2015, to around, that is almost double, that is 814 million by the year 2020. And also, India is projected to add 4 new mega cities by the year 2030. If you see the kind of, so this is the level of urbanization that India will actually undergo or transition by the year 2050. Now you can see what is the current scenario. So India is actually transitioning into an urban sanctuary due to a significant demographic changes, that is, a changes in the population. People are actually moving into the tier 2 as well as the tier 3 cities and their peripheries. Okay. Now let us understand what is the difference between the tier 2 as well as tier 3 cities. Tier 2 are medium-sized cities that have actually, developed a reasonable level of infrastructure and economic activity, but are not as large as or, economically significant as the top metropolitan areas like the tier 1 cities. Okay. And also, tier 2 cities often serve as a regional hub and they have growing influence on the surrounding rural areas. Example of tier 2 cities include Pune in Maharashtra and also Ahmedabad in Gujarat, etc. Now let us see what are tier 3 cities. These are actually smaller cities and towns that are typically less developed than the tier 2 cities but are still important in the context of urbanization. They are often characterized by growing population and they also have increasing urban infrastructure development. An example include Nagapattinam in Tamil Nadu as well as Siliguri in West Bengal. So these are examples. Now we've actually seen what is the concept of urban-rural continuum. Also, we've actually seen the status of India's urbanization. And also, we have seen India's urban-rural continuum, and that we actually saw in the context of how the demographic shifts have been happening in tier 2 as well as tier 3 cities. Now let us see what is the current policy framework that India has actually adopted. Okay, so India's challenges are often viewed as either rural or urban. So any area actually faces any challenge, India actually sees it as either a rural problem or an urban problem, and thereby they actually overlook their interconnected nature. So here what is the problem that India actually faces is there is over centralization of finances. That is, financial decentralization has been compromised in a lot of places, leading to constraints on the local bodies like the panchayats, the municipalities, etc. And also within the backdrop of this, the 13th Finance Commission highlighted these issues, noting that local bodies are financially suffocated. So this is actually a concern. The second one, there are tied versus untied grants. Okay. So financial support is often tied to specific schemes as well as specific taxes where only specific dimensions, like for example, only the education, only the health is actually focused on, which compromises the other dimensions. So these are called as tied grants, such as the linkage between property taxes as well as the SGST, causing the risks to losing grants. So now here it is important for us to understand what are tied grants as well as what are untied grants. Okay. So tied grants are nothing but these are the funds provided by higher levels of the government that has to be used only for specific purposes of the projects. Okay. And they come with conditions that limit their use to predetermined areas or initiatives. For example, the funds in India that are provided under various central schemes. For example, you take Amrut, that is Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation. These are considered tied grants. Okay, that is these grants are actually marked for specific urban infrastructure projects only, such as the sewage treatment plants, and cannot be used for other purposes like education, health, etc. So on the contrary, if you have to know what are untied grants, they on the other hand offer more flexibility. That is, the local bodies can actually use these funds for a range of other purposes also as per their discretion and needs. Example, the Finance Commission grants that are united can be used by the local bodies for a variety of needs including infrastructure development, education, health, etc. without any kind of strict conditions or limitations. Now, what are the challenges with existing flagship programs in India? Is that first one, if we see Swachh Bharat Mission and Amrut, as we discussed, these programs focus only on urban infrastructure, but they fail to consider the urban-rural continuum. And also Amrut's funding excludes the contiguous areas like the census towns and the urban villages, okay, as it is focused only on that particular area. That is what is called as inadequate coverage, okay. So again, Amrut and Swachh Bharat Mission address similar outcomes, but they actually address it separately. So there is a missed opportunity for integrated planning and infrastructure development, particularly in the, peripheral urban areas. Now, what are the governance models as well as recommendations? If you see the framework of the 73rd and the 74th constitutional amendments, these actually envision stronger district planning committees that include both the rural as well as the urban local bodies. However, these committees have become, subordinate to the district bureaucracy with time. Next, if you see, there has to be need for strengthened district planning committees where you need to revisit and strengthen these committees. This could help address the challenges better across the urban-rural continuum more effectively. Next one, if we actually see a case study, here Kerala actually acts as a beautiful case study where it has a unified approach to the local bodies. Where this is very important, you can actually write it even in your mains examination. In Kerala, both the urban and the rural local bodies fall under the Ministry of Local Self-Governments, and this is actually united, right? So this actually help coordinate the efforts between different levels of governance, including the municipal as well as the village or the panchayat administration. So it is unified as it actually comes under one ministry, that is Ministry of Local Self-Governments. Example, you can take a prominent example, for example, solid waste landfill site. The issue is a proposed solid waste landfill site was actually planned on the periphery of a particular town in, Kerala. This project aimed to address waste management needs by providing a location for the disposal of solid waste from both the rural and the nearby urban areas. The challenges that this would actually face, that is, they are trying to actually bring a solid waste landfill at a particular region where both the urban and the rural areas, they can actually dump it. But what can be the challenges? That the site faced opposition from the local residents and public pressure, which could have complicated or delayed the implementation of the project. But how Kerala actually stands as an example, it's because of the unified approach where both the rural and the urban local bodies fall under one Ministry of Local Self-Governments. So there was actually quicker resolution because of integrated decision making. Also, there was efficient coordination where it actually enables coordination between different local bodies, making it easier to address the concerns and implement solutions without any kind of bureaucratic delays. Also, what is the benefit of having the unified governance is that there is unified approach to the issues. That is, you have a holistic bird's eye view of this issue, which helps in designing the solutions that consider the needs and impact on the entire region rather than treating the urban and the rural areas separately. Next is enhanced public engagement. So this actually gives a responsive administration where the unified ministry can more effectively engage with the public and address the concerns, as it is a broader mandate covering both the urban as well as the rural areas. Okay. Next one is faster implementation can be done as well as improved outcomes are there. That is in terms of better planning and execution of the project that span across both the urban and the rural areas, ultimately leading to more effective solutions and enhanced public satisfaction. So, what is the way forward or the conclusion? Here, it is actually important to actually understand that India's challenges as well as concerns should not be isolated or be treated in silos. So what should be the conclusion of the way forward is that there has to be integrative planning both in terms of infrastructure as well as governance. And also, India's rapidly expanding urban areas necessitate urgent interventions that consider the urban-rural continuum. And traditional models of separate urban and rural local bodies also need updating. And finally, there is need for imaginative planning. What does that mean? There should be more flexibility in designing plans collaboratively across the urban and the rural areas to address the blurred lines between them effectively. The next article that we'll be discussing about is why commons matter and how community is key to their well-being. So in this particular article, as the title suggests, we'll be discussing about this particular concept of commons and also other relevant concepts of the global commons and the tragedy of commons, etc. And how are there, what is the governance framework surrounding the same. So moving forward, here we'll be discussing about the commons, and also since this article discusses about Forest Rights Act, we'll be looking at that as well as the provisions, eligibility, etc. And also this particular topic becomes very, very important for both your prelims examination under environment as well as the mains examination under GS paper 3, environment, conservation, environmental pollution and degradation. Moving forward, there has been a previous year question asked in the prelims examination in the year 2019 with respect to that of the Indian Forest Act as well as the provisions. Okay, so these kind of legislations, the provisions, the eligibility criteria, the beneficiaries, and who are they actually catering to become very, very important specifically for your prelims examination. Now moving forward, let us actually understand what this particular article is discussing about. So recently, Delhi had actually hosted a first of its kind dialogue on the conservation, on the restoration as well as the governance of the commons. So first of all, it is important for us to understand what is this particular concept of commons. So commons are nothing but it refers to resources that are owned or that are shared by a particular community or a group of people rather than owned by a particular individual. Okay, so whatever resources is actually owned by a group of people, that is a community, it is actually called as common, and this can actually include the forest as well as community lands, water bodies, grazing lands, parks, sacred sites, etc. And in urban settings, parks, lakes and other similar spaces are part of the commons. Okay. So here, it is important for us to understand what are the different types of commons. It can be tangible commons, it can be intangible commons, and also it can be the global commons. Okay, so something which is actually beyond, like the ocean, space, etc., all that actually become global commons. So first, the tangible commons include the physical resources which are shared by the community, such as it can be forests, it can be water bodies, the grazing lands as well as the parks. And intangible commons can be the non-material resources, like it can be a language, it can be a traditional knowledge, it can be cultural practices as well as any kind of local customs that are followed by a community or shared within communities. And finally, this concept of global commons is nothing but the resources that exist beyond the national jurisdictions, that can also include the oceans, the outer space, the Arctic, the moon, etc. Now moving forward, what are the major challenges in managing the global commons is very, very important. First one, always there are environmental threats. Next one, it's actually over exploitation, and also there is actually weak governance or the regulatory framework. So first let us look at this over exploitation part. So the concept of the tragedy of the commons was coined by an ecologist, that is Jared Hardin, in the year 1968. This actually explains how individuals tend to overuse and deplete the shared resources when the access is actually unrestricted. So if the access to any particular resource is unrestricted, how an individual actually exploit the resources, that ultimately leads to overexploitation. So without clearly defined rules and responsibilities, the common pool of resources may be exhausted by the individuals acting in their own or self-interest. Next one, there is actually weak or poor governance. Here, in urban areas, commons like parks and lakes are typically governed by the local authorities like the municipalities, but the rural commons are more vulnerable due to the absence of clear governance structures. The next one is environmental threats. So commons are increasingly threatened by, the process of climate change, deforestation, land fragmentation or land degradation, etc. Now moving forward, given that there is over exploitation, there is weak governance, etc., what can be or how significant can the role of community leadership be in this case? So here, earlier theories have actually emphasized the inevitable exploitation of commons without external intervention. However, if you see in 2009, Elinor Ostrom's research, Nobel Prize in Economics, was actually won in the year 2009. This countered this view. That is, earlier the view was that inevitably there will be exploitation without external intervention. But later, this particular person actually countered this view by demonstrating that community-led governance models are very, very effective. So his work showed that local communities could sustainably manage the commons if provided the necessary legal as well as the institutional frameworks. Now moving forward, since we've actually touched upon the forest rights, it's also important for us to understand what are the Forest Rights Act and what are the provisions, the eligibility criteria, etc. So The FRA, that is the Forest Right Act, is a landmark legislation that provides a legal framework for the governance and recognition of rights over the forest commons in India. So what rights and who actually possesses these rights over forest land in India? Okay, so this is what is FRA. It recognizes the land use and the conservation rights of the forest dwelling, scheduled tribes and other traditional forest dwellers. So what are the key provisions over here is that first one is land rights. The act grants individuals up to 4 hectares of land for cultivation, but this land cannot be sold or transferred except through inheritance. Next one is use rights. Forest dwellers are allowed to collect the minor forest produce, that is the MFP, example the herbs, the tendu leaves, etc., graze livestock and access traditional pastoral routes excluding the timber. Next one is right to conserve. Here, communities are empowered to protect and manage the forest, ensuring biodiversity conservation as well as ecological sustainability. And also, if you see the eligibility, that is who are eligible under this particular FRA, in order to, be the beneficiaries of the provisions, is that rights are available to the scheduled tribes and the other forest dwellers who have resided in the forest for at least 3 generations. Very, very important. That is for a maximum or a minimum period of about 75 years before December 13, 2005. And what is the role of Gram Sabha over here? Here, the Gram Sabha verifies the claims of the land. It recommends the recognition of rights and also manages the resources access with the community. The next article that we'll be discussing about is behind Typhoon Yagi becoming the most powerful storm in Asia this year. So as the title suggests, here it is important for us to understand the concept of typhoon, and also it is important for you to know the different nomenclatures that are given for tropical cyclones across the globe. So here we'll be discussing about the formation and the process of tropical cyclones and the area and the different nomenclature given to them across the globe, and this is actually important for both your prelims as well as the mains examination under Indian and World Geography, Physical, Social, Economic Geography of India and the World. And for the mains examination, it can be mapped to GS paper 1, important geophysical phenomena such as earthquake, tsunami, volcanic activity, cyclone, etc. Moving forward, there has been a previous year question which has been asked in the mains examination in the year 2014 with respect to that of tropical cyclones and why they are largely confined to the South China Sea, Bay of Bengal and Gulf of Mexico. So, apart from understanding the process and the formation, it is also important for us to understand why is there a particular phenomena concentrated in a particular region of the world. Now, moving forward, let us understand what this particular article is discussing about. So, Typhoon Yagi is the most powerful storm in Asia so far, that is this year, and the second strongest globally following the Hurricane Beryl. And also, which are the countries it had actually severely affected was that it severely impacted countries like the Vietnam, the Philippines, China, Laos, Myanmar as well as Thailand, with Vietnam actually suffering the most, resulting in approximately over 230 deaths. And also, what are the reasons behind it or the driving factors? It actually includes the torrential rains, the floods as well as the landslides continue to affect millions in Southeast Asia. Now, moving forward, it is important for us to understand what are the differences between cyclones, typhoons as well as hurricanes, whether it is actually different in the formation itself or whether it is actually different with respect to the nomenclature or the names that is given to these tropical cyclones in different parts of the world. So, cyclones, typhoons and hurricanes are essentially the same type of storm, but they are named differently based on the region where they are occurring. They are all tropical cyclones. So, it is important for us to understand whether it is a cyclone or whether it is a typhoon or a hurricane. These are all the tropical cyclones. These are actually very powerful rotating storm systems which are characterized by very strong winds, heavy rain as well as the center which is characterized by low pressure. Okay. Now, let us actually see the difference. First one is cyclone. This term is actually used for tropical storms in the Indian Ocean as well as in the South Pacific Ocean. So, if you actually look at the map, so this portion is the Pacific Ocean and this is also the Pacific Ocean. This is the Atlantic Ocean and this is your Indian Ocean. So, here the cyclone, if you see, these are tropical storms in the Indian Ocean and in the South Pacific Ocean. So, this is the Indian Ocean as well as in the South Pacific Ocean. Next, if you see, what is the term typhoon? This name is used for storms forming in the northwestern Pacific. Okay, so this is actually the typhoon. This is the northwestern Pacific Ocean, particularly if you see in East Asia, including regions like Japan, the Philippines, as well as China. However, if you see hurricane, it is used for tropical cyclones again that occur in the Atlantic Ocean. So this is the Atlantic Ocean and hurricane is the term which is given to that, and also the Northeast Pacific Ocean, okay, along this region. And also this is east of the international dateline. Now moving forward, it is important for us to understand the process of formation of the tropical cyclones. So tropical cyclones form over warm ocean waters near the equator. So if this is the equator and if there is actually the oceans which are present over here, then when the warm ocean waters are there, and here it is where your tropical cyclones actually form. And how does this process actually begin is that the process begins when the warm moist air rises. So when the water is actually heated, then what happens? The warm moist air actually rises from the ocean surface, and this actually creates a region of low pressure over here. And air from the surrounding high pressure areas also rush into this particular low pressure zone, and this also eventually gets warmed up and also rises. And as the warm air rises, it cools and forms the clouds above and the thunderstorms. And this system actually strengthens by drawing heat from the ocean and the evaporating water, which fuels the cyclone. And if you see the stages of development, there are different stages. First one, it's called a tropical depression when the wind speed is actually below 63 km per hour. And it is called a tropical storm when the wind speed is between 63 km per hour and 119. And it is called a tropical cyclone or a hurricane or a typhoon when the wind speed is actually above 119 km per hour or more. Now moving on, this is actually the continuation of the formation. So it is actually categorized based on the speed of the wind by Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale, which is actually measured from category 1 where the speed is actually between 119 to 153 to category 5 where it actually goes above 252 km per hour. So here it's actually a small infographic that actually talks about how tropical cyclones are formed. So what are the driving factors majorly is that first, there is high humidity and ocean temperatures, which is actually over 26 degrees Celsius, are the major contributing factors. Okay, so when there is a lot of humidity or moisture and when the temperature is above 26 degrees, so these are the ideal factors when the tropical cyclones are formed. So here what happens, the water evaporates from the ocean surface and gets in contact with a mass of cold air, and this actually forms or results in the formation of clouds. Then what happens? A column of low pressure develops at the center and the winds form around this particular low pressure column. And finally what happens, as the pressure of the central column, that is the central column is called the eye. So it is important for you to know what is the eye of the cyclone, what is the wall, etc. And as the pressure in this particular eye actually weakens, the speed of the wind around it actually increases, resulting in the tropical cyclones. So now basically it is important for us to understand what is the process of naming the cyclones across the globe. So tropical cyclones are named to avoid confusion and to ensure clear communication. So here the regional meteorological organizations assign names from predetermined lists. Already the list is actually created, often rotating on a 5 to 6 year basis. And different regions use different naming conventions, like the typhoons in the Pacific that we saw, the hurricanes in the Atlantic, and so on. In Asia, the naming is done by the Typhoon Committee, which includes countries like the Japan, the Philippines, China, Thailand, as well as Vietnam. And also, now is there a relevance with respect to that of frequent as well as extreme occurrences of cyclones with that of the climate change? So let us actually see. So is climate change making tropical cyclones worse? Scientists have actually not reached a full consensus on how climate change has actually affected or have been affecting the tropical cyclones, as many factors contribute to the storm formation as well as intensity. Okay. However, there is broad agreement that tropical cyclones are becoming more intense due to the rising global temperatures. And if you see, the rising global temperatures thereby result in the formation or, in the warming up of the surface, okay, of the water. So, warmer ocean surface temperature up by 0.9 degrees since 1850 provide more energy for the storms, thereby intensifying them and leading to more rapid formation. And a recent study also has indicated that tropical cyclones are forming closer to the coastlines, intensifying faster and also lingering longer over land, primarily due to warmer ocean temperatures. The next article that we'll be discussing about is Nipah death confirmed in Malappuram. So as the title suggests, here we'll be discussing about the spread and the resurgence of the Nipah virus. And any kind of disease, it is important for us to understand what is the mode of transmission, the symptoms, the treatment, etc., as well as the difficulties that India actually faces with respect to that of the lack or inadequate presence of vaccines. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about the Nipah virus as well as the test, that is ELISA, which is used to test the same. And this particular topic is important for both the prelims as well as the mains examination under GS paper 2, issues related to health, as well as GS paper 3, biotechnology. Moving forward, there has been a previous year question that was asked in the 2017 prelims examination with respect to that of the Zika virus disease. Similarly, Nipah virus also becomes an important topic for discussion. Now moving forward, let us understand what this particular article is talking about. So, a 24-year-old man from Malappuram district in Kerala recently died of Nipah infection, and this has been confirmed by tests conducted at the National Institute of Virology, Pune. Okay, so here it is very important to understand that the Nipah actually has had historical precedents. Okay, so past Nipah infections in Kerala occurred in areas where there were, prevalence of fruit bats. And in 2019 case in Kochi was there, it was linked to fruit bitten by a bat. And in 2021, the case at Kozhikode involved the consumption of a rambutan fruit. And in 2023, the outbreak in Kozhikode was linked to farmland with banana cultivation as well as the fruit bats. Okay. So now it is important for us to understand this particular concept of Nipah virus. So Nipah virus is a zoonotic virus which is actually transmitted from animals to humans and can also be spread through contaminated food or also directly between two people. And also, what is a natural reservoir of the Nipah virus is fruit bats, which actually belong to the family Pteropodidae, particularly the species belonging to the Pteropus genus. And the transmission to the humans occurs through direct contact with infected bats. It can be pigs or even human beings. Here if you see the incubation, that is if you see the symptoms, the incubation period, this is nothing but the time from which you are actually infected to the time where the symptoms actually show up. So the incubation period ranges from 4 to 14 days but can be as long as 45 days. And also the symptoms include fever, headache, dizziness, drowsiness as well as respiratory illness, and severe cases may progress to encephalitis characterized by inflammation of the brain leading to confusion, coma as well as death. Moving forward, let us actually see what are the available diagnosis as well as the treatment. So laboratory tests such as the PCR test, that is nothing but polymerase chain reaction, as well as ELISA, that is enzyme linked immunosorbent assay, and virus isolation can confirm NIV infection. And samples usually include throat swabs as well as cerebrospinal fluid, the urine or the blood. And there is no specific antiviral treatment, very, very important for the Nipah virus. And however, you can actually manage, that is management is supportive, focusing on the treatment of the symptoms as well as complications, and experimental treatments including the antiviral drugs as well as monoclonal antibodies are also under investigation in order to treat this particular disease. Now let us solve few prelims as well as a mains practice question. The first question reads, with reference to that of the tropical cyclones, which of the following factors contribute to their formation? Warm ocean waters, yes, this is correct. High atmospheric pressure at the surface, no, this is low atmospheric pressure. Coriolis force, this is correct. And presence of an anticyclone in the upper atmosphere, this is also wrong. So select the correct answer using the code given below. Since the statement 1 as well as 3 are correct, here the correct answer will be option A. Now moving on, the second question reads, consider the following statements with respect to that of the Nipah virus. It is only transmitted through direct contact with infected pigs. No, this is the wrong option. The natural reservoir of the virus is fruit bats of the family Pteropodidae. Yes, this is correct. And the incubation period of the Nipah virus can be as long as 45 days. This is also correct. There is a specific antiviral treatment available for the infection. No, this is wrong. Since statements 2 and 3 are correct, the correct answer will be option B. Now moving forward, the third question reads, which of the following is not a provision under the Forest Rights Act of 2006? Forest dwellers can collect the MFPs, that is the minor forest produce excluding timber. Yes, this is correct. Individuals can be granted up to 4 hectares of land for cultivation but cannot sell or transfer it except through inheritance. This is also correct. Forest dwellers are allowed to harvest timber for their personal use. This is actually wrong. And next one is communities are empowered to protect and manage the forest, ensuring biodiversity conservation and ecological sustainability. This is also correct. Since all the statements are correct except for C, the answer will be option C. Now moving on, the fourth question actually reads, which of the following statements about the naming of the tropical cyclones is or are correct? The cyclones are named to reduce confusion during the communication or warnings. Yes, this is correct. The naming convention is actually uniform globally with the WMO overseeing the process. This is actually wrong. And next one is, in the Northwest Pacific Ocean, the Typhoon Committee consisting of various countries is responsible for naming. Yes, this is actually correct. Since statements 1 and 3 are correct, the correct answer will be option B. Now moving on, the fifth question actually reads, India's services sector has experienced rapid growth over the past 2 decades, and what could be the possible reasons? 1 is economic liberalization and reforms initiated in 1991. Yes, this is correct. Availability of a large pool of skilled and relatively cheap labor. This is also correct. And declining demand for IT and BPO services. This is actually wrong. So since statement 1 and 2 are correct, the correct answer will be option A. Now let us solve the mains practice question. The question reads, discuss the significance of the urban-rural continuum in India's urban development planning and substantiate your answer with relevant examples. So the approach to this particular question has been classified into 3 parts, that is the introduction, the body as well as the conclusion. In the introduction, first let us actually define what is the urban-rural continuum and its relevance with respect to that of the urban development planning in India. And in the body, we'll be discussing about explaining how treating the urban and the rural areas as interconnected enhances the planning effectiveness. Next, we'll discuss the current challenges like the financial centralization and gaps in the flagship programs such as Amrut as well as the Swachh Bharat mission. And finally, we will highlight Kerala's unified local governance model as an example or the case study. And towards the conclusion, we will actually summarize the benefits of an integrated approach and the need for revising the traditional planning models in order to address the urban-rural challenges effectively. With this, we've actually come to the end of our daily news analysis session for today. So for more updates as well as more such videos, please do like, share and subscribe to Narayana IAS Academy YouTube channel. Thank you.